Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Workgrid. I'm your host, Rob Ryan, and today we're diving deep into the dynamic realm and role of internal communications within the digital workplace. Joining me is the insightful Asha Kucza, Employee Communications Manager at State Street, whose extensive background spans internal comms, marketing, and public relations. Asha brings a wealth of knowledge and a unique perspective on how internal comms can significantly contribute to adding value for employees by guiding communications for transformation, adoption, awareness, and the overall health of the digital workplace. In our conversation, we explore the ever-changing environment of hybrid work, the strategic importance of personas, proper segmentation in the digital sphere, and the critical role that employee communication tools play. Asha shares her invaluable expertise in utilizing technology and how to distribute and gauge the impact of corporate messages. We delve into best practices, tools, strategies that are revolutionizing how companies engage with their employees and the ways to aim and create a more connected, more informed, unified workforce. Plus, we tackle that age-old question, who owns the intranet? Continue listening on for so much more. Hey, Asha, welcome to the Workgrid podcast. Before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the work you've been doing over the last few years?
Hey, Rob. It's so great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I'm currently Internal Communications Manager at State Street, which is one of the leading custody banks with over 40,000 employees worldwide. And my focus within the internal communications team is the technology area and our digital workspace. So this is me currently.
Fantastic. And I believe when we first met to kind of discuss the podcast, the episode, and whatnot, you described a bit that you actually worked quite a bit of time within public relations and then transitioned over internal communications. Tell me a bit about that.
Yes, so my professional career has been always sort of on this junction of three areas, which was HR, communications, and technology. And in the past, I started as a public relations professional. I went through several different industries to kind of land in HR industry with recruitment companies of different sizes. And from there, I moved to more technology focus within HR. And after around 10 years of that career, I decided to make a flip to the internal side of things, right? So from the external to internal, becoming the internal communications manager at State Street. In the meantime, in my previous external facing career, I was also kind of expanding my role to the marketing, and I was both B2B and B2C marketing. So I actually kind of a 360 portfolio of our perspective on communications, both external to internal.
Fantastic. And, that sounds like a perfect fit for working in and around the digital workplace and community, external public relations, internal communications, and human resources as well. So what are some of your takes on some of those key differences between external, internal comms, and really taking some of those best practices that are applied as practices within marketing for segmentation, understanding nuance, sentiment, et cetera, and bringing those into internal communications?
I think there's so much that internal comms can learn from and kind of pull from external comms. And I think as internal, we've kind of been the little sister, little brother, if you can put it that way. Like, you have this big area of the marketing research, marketing channels, right? Marketing technologies that's been there, and companies have been investing heavily we're talking about technology, right? So in technology tools that support marketing communications, personalization has been there for years, if not decades, right? Segmentation the same, the funnels, right? Building the whole kind of chain of how the customer flows through different communications to actually create a marketing lead, etc. I think that internal comms kind of can be perceived in exactly the same way, right? Our customers is our internal audience, our employees, and we also want to take them on this journey from, hearing about something, getting more, interested with it, understanding it, right, and taking action. So we also kind of create the internal leads. I like to think about it that way. This is even more true for digital transformation when we, need people to kind of embark on journeys with completely new technologies, embrace new ways of working, which is always not that easy for them, right? So we actually have to sell it to them.
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot of kind of the philosophy behind how we think about internal comms should be in many ways similar to how we think about external comms. But of course, the investment is not as high. Of course, like marketing, is bringing a lot of profits that you can directly measure. There's always been a challenge with, measuring internal comms in a way to prove that this actually brings benefit to the company. But of course it does. And there are better ways to measure it. And we also can touch on this later. But I think, there is technology evolving as well for internal communications. And we have more and more tools to benefit from and to make our work, more precise in how we think about our audiences. One important thing that I'm kind of always seeing as a benefit that internal comms has compared to an external is that, we know our audience, our client pretty well. We kind of have them at hand, right? We have all these HR systems that help us understand who our audience is. We can reach out and connect with them directly. We don't need to assume if they're there or not. They are there. But of course, we still have to think about it in a way, like if our communications is interesting enough, right? It's not enough to have someone's emails to make sure they actually read and they understand the content. We're also using different tools to capture the click-through rates and the reactions, the actions that the employees are taking. So I think we as internal comms are evolving that way, like kind of following the path set by marketing. But there's still a lot we can, continue to do.
It's a great point, and certainly it's something that is oftentimes talked around the digital workplace and employee experience, which is internal communications is oftentimes the cobbler's children has no shoes, and then they look over the fence and marketing has all the shiny new toys in which to really identify, segment, measure, etc. How are some of the ways that you've been segmenting, personalizing from a persona perspective to really identify and understand where people are? Like you mentioned, the personas and the roles, but the way they want to receive those communications, that can be very nuanced in terms of, did this land? Was this open? Was this understood, etc.?
Yeah, so we've been looking at this from several angles. So one thing is the profile of the user, right? And I'm thinking about them as users. They're our employees, but they're also users of our technology. So the profile of the user differs a lot depending on, which department they're sitting in, because that would differentiate the technology they may be using in that department, right? So the whole technology stack that they have determines their day-to-day digital experience. So we have to have that in mind when we create any communications that goes across, broader group of employees. Like, is their daily digital experience the same, or actually do we have several types of personas there, and we actually should tailor the communications a little bit to acknowledge these different scenarios that they operate in, so that our messaging is more understandable to them, right? And kind of fits their kind of what they would call, oh, this is exactly my day. They know how my day looks like. They know how to kind of apply this news, this change, this transformation to my day-to-day. So we would go, of course, with the typical how internal comms divides users into departments or countries, locations, etc. But we have to apply also this technology stack element to it to make sure that this communication is better received, right? Is better understood.
Some of those metrics that you might use to measure the effectiveness, knowing that the message, the communication, the campaign has landed, let's say within a particular population, how might you go about measuring that, making sense of whether there's alignment?
Yeah, so measuring there are several kind of stages or elements that we can measure our success So one thing, of course, is the communication reaching the employees. And, if we are using different channels, we are using our intranet, we are using our kind of internal social media platform with like seeing the views there, the reactions, the likes. So that's kind of the first stage, right? But then if you talk about the technology adoption, then you look about how many users logged in, how many users took action within the platform, right? So we partner very closely with our technology teams to analyze the adoption from kind of the more the technical perspective and ensure that our users are kind of following the path that we set for them with the adoption scheme, with the rollout for the specific technology. But I think it's also important to always keep in mind that you cannot capture everything in these metrics. There's always going to be some area, right, of those who may have read, maybe haven't understood, may have launched, but maybe haven't used that that well, etc. So I'm always trying to advise to my partners in technology to make sure to have the basic things like frequently asked questions, what the users may wonder about, and we kind of proactively suggest some questions to them and some answers to them. Or we want to, set context and set channels that will allow them to go back to us and ask questions, right? We want to have forums. We want to have Ask Me Anything on some bigger rollouts, or we would have just simple, office hours for more dedicated technical kind of sessions, and of course a training that kind of pairs with it, right? So kind of separating from looking at the metrics themselves, we don't need to we should not just stay passively looking at the metrics. We should proactively make sure that we create all these different formats for our audiences to be able to consume this change in different ways. And kind of going back to your earlier question about how users consume right, and interact with us around the communication that they receive. This is also important to keep in mind the different preferences of these users in terms of how they want to be communicated, right? So exactly, like some of them would prefer to receive the regular email, right? But more and more so, they want to, be able to interact with this content. So they want to get it in our social media platform and can go in, directly and respond, comment, ask a question, share with a colleague, kind of connect to others. And again, all these different formats, open formats that allow for our, leaders and technology teams to meet with our audiences and help them understand the change in more detail.
That's great. It sounds like you're marrying both the qualitative and the quantitative metrics, as well as layering in the sentiment focused into more feedback loops, whether it be through community, Q&A, AMAs, et cetera, office hours, and gathering that data to really get a profile in terms of usage, adoption. Am I hearing that correct?
Yes, that's exactly that. And I think another important kind of pre-step is always trying to pilot the bigger thing. So like always have a group of these more motivated users, right? These more users more prone to taking this first step and testing out new technologies. And it's important to think about them not only as people that but kind of make sure that the composition of the pilot group represents in a good way the diverse personas we may have in the company, right? So that we actually capture all the different feedback, all the different potential issues, right? Or questions that we may run into. And so this is something we always do. We really carefully, kind of plan our pilots and think through, how we want to collect feedback. Do we want to have a session with these people? Do we want to have a simple form, or maybe we want to have a Teams channel where we're gonna be, just discussing with them about some things. So there are also, different options we can use for that. But this piloting element is very important, and that helps not only the technology teams to prepare the solution even better and make the rollout even smoother, but this is really helpful for us as internal communications professionals to prepare the content that we may already expect that will be needed, so that when we actually roll out, our technology teams are equipped with this language that they can use, right? That is right away ready for them to reply to the most common questions and, provide with instructions and provide with guides. And this is something I really appreciate working with our technology teams at Stay Street. They're really eager to, help kind of work with us on these materials, these guides, and there is a lot of openness in terms of respecting the user and their need for better understanding and clarifications. So yeah.
That's fantastic. That partnership piece. And I want to touch upon that maybe in a second or so. But I wanted to ask you a kind of a segue into digital workplace technology as a whole, and not asking to name any particular software vendors out there, not naming names, but what do you think is missing from an internal communications perspective in some of the software feature functionality stacks that we see that would really help corporate communication professionals?
I would go back to metrics. That would be my first point, because as much as we, of course, have some metrics, I think the level of metrics that we have to really understand the impact is really below what we would need to make this really useful. And what I'm saying is, just knowing that someone clicked, or just knowing that the number of views does not tell us much, right, about the kind of who these people are, what do we should we do next, etc. How do they engage with the content? So there is a lot of information that we could be capturing, but we are not. And I know that the technology providers are also looking for ways to simplify the experience. I guess they're assuming that internal communications pros are not kind of technical people, so they need things simple, right? But I think this is a little bit of misassumption, in the sense
Yeah.
that I think the digital skills become really an important part of the internal communications skill set, and we do need these more advanced options, right? To help us understand how our communication um, attracts the employees' attention, and how does it kind of motivate employees to take action and engage more with the content, with the leadership. Other thing that I would love for the technology tools that are used for internal communications to offer is to really integrate this experience. And there are a lot of vendors out there who say they offer integrated experience, but it's oftentimes their perception of, okay, we offer a couple of channels together. I would love to be able to connect different tools that we have from different vendors in a way that we see how employees kind of flow from one. So they may interact with content over email, but they move to the intranet. They want to maybe discuss in a social platform, right? And then maybe take the action in the actual platform that we're promoting, be it an HR system or whatever it is, right? So to be able to capture how this kind of funnel, right? Speaking of the marketing language, how this funnel works, right? How the employees, enter and how they move through the system, and kind of be able to really say, okay, so we have these remaining, I don't know, 15% of employees that have still not engaged, right? They went halfway, but then they kind of got stuck. What can we do to, encourage them? Well, we could maybe have a dedicated training, but then having the ability to actually target these employees and really go to them with this very specific messaging related to, hey, we saw you got interested, but maybe there are some things we may help you understand better. This is a training that will help you kind of understand this technology, or have a forum for asking your questions. Like, we could really address what we think might be the reason for them not getting engaged with our technology, or with our new rollout, or whatever that is. So that would be kind of a dream scenario. And then anything that gets us closer to it is something I would welcome with open arms.
It's funny. I've heard that over the years, is the lack of being able to really map that journey effectively. And you're right, there's been some tools out there that have claimed it, to be able to say, hey, we can notice where people drop off or whatnot. But if it's not necessarily part of that ecosystem, then you definitely see those gaps on the end of truly mapping, and of course, on the marketing side of the house, there's so many other tools, technologies available to deeply understand, maybe too deeply understand, who that user is, and what their needs are, or even what they were talking about in their living room.
I would
One of the
also add, Rob, I'm just making me think what you just said, right? The whole ecosystem is one thing. Like, we really want to have, as a company, right, as an enterprise, we really need to be thinking about the whole ecosystem we are creating. And oftentimes, you can see some departments going out and bringing in a technology to, cover one of their goals, but then the other department will bring a different technology that will maybe cover a similar goal, right? So sometimes this kind of technology stack keeps on growing and growing. And of course, there's always, a level of governance around it, and that ensures some, security and cohesion. But sometimes some features are not analyzed in a way to say that, hey, we already have a tool that does that. Do we actually need another tool, or can we just develop something within the first one? So this is an experience that this is an element that makes the employee experience harder and harder, is that with more and more technology, right, coming in to the workplace, employees just get confused with all these different platforms they have to use, and like which one to use for what, and all these names of these platforms, and the vendors like keep on changing these names. So one day it's called A, the next day it's called B. The user is no longer sure, like, what am I using? Is it the same thing? So this is not helpful, right? But I mean, I understand it has to evolve, but having some sort of, exactly as you put it, ecosystem as a kind of goal and kind of ultimate vision, to have this ecosystem as friendly as possible, should be something that we should be also looking at. Maybe not us as internal comms, but our partners in technology and the business side. Definitely something worth keeping in mind. And also, speaking of, to the other point you made, speaking of how much we know about our employees, indeed, in marketing, we tend to want to know even too much about our audience. Like we tend to want to know like what they ate for breakfast, or do they have a dog that they walk 2 times a day, etc. Because we having that knowledge, a lot of marketing professionals would say, well, having that knowledge would allow us to sell better, right, or reach them better, or be with them when they are ready to consume our content. Internally, I observe that in internal communications, we are often driven a little bit more top down, in the sense of why we are targeting employees, or like who we are targeting, right? It's more so employees in this department have to have this understanding, or have to receive these communications just because they're in this department, which of course makes sense, right? If there is an org announcement related to a department, then they have to be made aware about it. But we are not so much looking into this kind of, I would say, like reverse, like maybe bottom up, or from employee perspective, like, why do I need to know this, right? So I think that, for technology, especially, understanding if the user is maybe, an early adopter, right? Talking about our phases of adoption, and the approach that users may have to new technology. If the user is an early adopter, if they're eager to engage, or if they're more of, a skeptical, user that is more like waiting to be, to see the proofs of the new technology being useful. So, understanding more of this nuanced context and kind of behavioral parametrics of our audience makes it really helpful, would make it very helpful to have the comms even more effective. And we do not have tools that allow us easily to measure it. Of course, we can set up, communities of these more engaged users that are, eager to test technologies and try it out. We have that group at State Street as well. We work with them very closely. They're called Digital Champions, and they're just fantastic people, across the globe. People who are willing to jump in, share their feedback, test things. But like, there is no technology that would allow us to capture these behaviors in a way that we would simply know these are the users that you should engage in the first part of your rollout, right? Like kind of following the at least a theoretical mapping of different types of users. So again, one more feature or direction that the technology could move and evolve towards, that would be helpful to have even more productive and effective communications for digital workspace.
Yeah, I think again, this would be probably actually maybe not even in the far-flung future, but perhaps even more near with the rise of AI. But being able to understand who the user is, where they're participating, and then taking those top-down key messages and then delivering them intelligently where they happen to be. Because, like you said, tech debt, unrationalized technology, that's an incredibly large problem for any organization, regardless of size, just that growing bloat of tech to solve for needs. And oftentimes that takes strong governance, really good end user computing teams to cut down on that, what oftentimes is over 30% of technical debt that we're managing and maintaining. But if there's a way to really understand the user intuitively and deliver those messages across their channels, well, that's a win-win for the org and a win-win for the employee. To that, as we've made this kind of like jump into a more hybrid work model, What are some of those lessons learned from corporate communications pre-pandemic to now here, where folks are working more remote, working more hybrid class models? Um, how's that identification go in terms of targeting? Has it shifted? Has it changed? Has things remained the same?
I think it definitely made us look more into multi-channel as a must-have. So with users, having different hybrid ways of working, different places they connect from, different, timing of their work, etc. We as internal communications professionals have to think through how do we best provide and serve this knowledge, this information to the user, where they are and when they are available. So keeping in mind that you may want to have a composition of an email, an intranet, and maybe a series of sessions, one pagers, like different formats that will allow the employee to connect with this content that is most suitable for them. I think it also the positive that came through the the kind of this push to the remote and now hybrid work is that I feel there is even more openness on the leadership side, including the technology leadership side, to be more transparent with the user about the plans, the strategies, just to kind of help employees embrace this constant change, and kind of help them feel more comfortable with the fact that, yes, we are constantly changing and you have to expect that, um, this will not, stop at any point soon, right? The technology will continue to evolve, but at the same time, we are open to provide you with the perspective of where we are going, what's happening, why it's happening, so that with this bigger context, typically a human being is more prone to accept this change, right, easily. So I think this transparency and this kind of also creativeness and like this openness to use different forms of communication, different types of channels is a benefit to the user in the end, right? And we as internal comms can really make use of all these different formats to help them digest communications.
One of the questions I had for you is the relationship that oftentimes internal communications, corporate communications has to build across the business and as well as IT. How are some of the ways that you're partnering with IT and user computing to ensure that the technologies, the channels, the tech stack is the right mix for your audience?
Building this partnership is, I think, the first most important thing for being able to provide good communications. And it has to work both ways. So it's both the internal comms professional has to have this, curiosity and willingness to learn about technology, to ask the questions, to understand it, to even test it, right, ourselves if possible, so that we really know what we are writing and talking about. But at the same time, it's important that we educate our partners on technology side into what our users need in terms of, receiving this information, why it is important to provide all these different answers to FAQs upfront, why it's important to plan this communication and not just roll out as we go and see what happens, kind of. Sometimes it's funny how we observe the agile approach that is, so common within our technology teams, right? It kind of sometimes technology teams seems to be tempted to also understand this agile approach as let's not communicate anything up front. Let's not prepare communication. Let's see as we go. While I think that, while agile is a very great, very good way to optimize and prepare for the rollout and do it in small bits. At the same time, I think for the technology communications to work, it has to be really prepared and understood up front. And we have to come up with this language that both is correct from the technology perspective, but also is consumable for the user and is easy to understand. So it's this two-way partnership that we want to establish and cherish. And what I really take care always to do is have regular catch-ups with my technology partners to understand, what's in the cooking, what's coming, and not only in the next week, but like next month and the next year, and also trying to bring in some suggestion in terms of I'm seeing a lot of, for example, AI now, right? AI is like the top term Google of last year. So, with this, we as internal comms are also the ones proactively coming in and saying, what else can we, can we talk about? How can we help you transmit this information to the users, right? So we are always having this close touch points with our technology partners. Well, of course, there are some areas where we still need to build this partnership even stronger, right? And there are some areas of, that are a little gray around like who owns this. This is a typical conversation I've been hearing from internally in our company, but also colleagues, peers at other companies, is who really owns the intranet question, right? Is it the ownership?
It's an age-old question.
Yes. Is it owned by internal comms? Is it owned by technology? Well, it's a partnership, but kind of who owns it more? Who sets the tone? Who sets the strategy? Who has the budget? Right? All these questions. So I think there are, there are areas, but this requires a conversation. This requires sitting at the table and saying, okay, we see the need for for these things to happen, right? We see that the employees need the intranet to be used for easy access to content. How can we achieve that? How can technology help us achieve it, right? And then how we can build this further. So I think this dialogue is a really important element of day-to-day work of an internal communications professional for technology area.
That's great. It sounds like you folks have that certainly instilled and framed. And over the course of my career, I've stood up countless intranets and sold a countless number more. And one of the things that I noticed in terms of success was the organizations that, one, partnered well between the business and IT, and two, put a governance structure in place and a program strategy in place in terms of the intranet. It was a program that was shared across functions to drive its success. And we oftentimes see things get shaky was we had a governance committee, but then it fell off after 6 months because people got busy doing their other things. Or we had a program strategy and then that kind of petered out and we started focusing on other things. But the ones that really drive success are the ones where they have that strong partnership, where they're able to come to the table and really define what that means for the organization and the employee.
Exactly it is. And also I think the challenge lies in the fact that internal communications tools such as intranet we know they are critical, but they do not seem critical in the sense of, okay, the business can be still running without it, right? The users will somehow find the information. But there is a lot of productivity loss in making users need to look for information and dedicate time to it versus them just going to the intranet that is built correctly and has a well-established search functionality and just get the info immediately, right? I mean, this is a huge improvement to the company's productivity and to the user experience, which also translates into a more engaged and motivated workforce that kind of appreciates having the workplace that is set up for them to do their work efficiently and easily.
Brilliant. So a couple final questions here for you, Asha, during our what I like to call a lightning round. But what's your go-to productivity hack for managing your day-to-day tasks and staying focused?
My recent hack, this has been, I think, a couple of months that I've been using this one, but I can really recommend it as a great thing, is actually trying to plan your to-do list, not in a sense of just having the list of bullet points, I need to do these things this week, but it's really setting time in your calendar to do it, right? If you have especially the bigger chunks of the work that require more focus, the ones that we typically try to avoid and put for later and just be busy with so many much more important things like just checking email and replying to email, right? Because we know this is going to be this hard task that awaits for us. So with these kind of tasks, I found that booking time specifically for that, like this focus time, and actually kind of forcing myself to do it, right? Not easily giving up and just saying, okay, I'm going to try next time, is something that makes work very productive. Because if you just plan your day in a way that you actually get these big stones kind of covered across your week, be it one big item per day, right? And then the rest of the day you can use for these kind of smaller building blocks of your overall work scope, but having like at least one big stone, as I call it, done once a day, gets you also more motivated, right? I think we realized that in this um, also remote and hybrid work setup, it's so important to stay self-motivated and self-structured so that we are not, kind of feeling that this is kind of work is running all around us, but we are not kind of grasping it in the right way. So that helped me, the setting of this time blocked for big important items that I need to focus on.
I think that's something everyone should adopt is setting that time with oneself. Otherwise, the notifications, the distractions, well, they'll take you away, whether you like it or not. What's the most important lesson you've learned in your career?
I won't say anything very new to many of the internal communications, but I think it's important to reiterate. My most important lessons is listen to the others and listen, attentively. And this is both for listening to the leadership and what they say directly, what they say indirectly, right? Understand their motives, understand the context, understand what they expect of you. But also listen to your audience and stay attentive to different forms of feedback you can hear. Don't neglect, something you may consider, oh, this is just one voice of someone somewhere. Like maybe this someone is just, brave enough to raise this voice. Maybe others share that feeling and that perspective, but they're not, kind of raising it openly. So I think listening is really the key skill of an internal communications professional. And this has been my constant lesson in the sense that I'm quite talkative. I'm quite, open and interacting easily with people. So for people like me, I think, it's easy to forget to listen because we are so much easily starting to talk ourselves. But I've been constantly reminded of the importance of listening to others.
That's great. And if you could recommend any resource, book, whatnot, but for those who are kind of maybe starting their corporate comms, internal comms career, what might you point them towards?
My approach to educating myself and getting more insights in what I'm doing have been to really go out there and benefit from the amazing load of podcasts and videos that are user created content available out there. I think that this has been um, an incredibly insightful way to capture different perspectives and different nuances of technology. So just to give an example, if there is a new technology rolling out, right, and I'm supposed to start drafting communications about it, what I would do, I would go to the browser and just browse what different digital experts or podcasters, right, recorded or wrote about it, so that they can capture, not only the official language of the platform we are promoting or the vendor that we're promoting, but also the different experiences user had with it. If there is already, some content available, right? But usually there is some content available from the pilots or some test groups. So I've been really proactively browsing my insights, to say so, right, and relying on different podcasts to stay up to date.
Fantastic. Asha, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on to the Workgrid.
It was amazing to speak with you, Rob, and thank you for inviting me.